Here, an address by His Excellency Alberto Fernández, President of the Argentine Republic. I request the protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Alberto Fernández, President of the Argentine Republic, and invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, often in history, magnicides have stood as prologues to major tragedies. Driven by the rejection or hatred of victims, those who carried out such acts undermined public peace and paved the way to major social unrest. Entire peoples fell foul of these prophets of hatred. For this very reason, seeking to exalt the eminently rational principle of democratic coexistence, I wish to begin this address by expressing gratitude for the solidarity which Argentina has received from across the world following the attempted magnicide targeting our Vice President, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner. In Argentina, the attempt to assassinate the Vice President did not only disturb the peace, it also sought to destroy a beautiful collective project that this year will mark 4 decades of existence. In 1983, we restored democracy and we ushered in a long historical cycle in which various political forces alternated in taking up the reins of government. The Argentinian people developed the agreement of no more. We said no more to state terrorism and to political violence. We value democracy as a model of social development, which calls for the respect of the other in diversity. I am sure that fascist violence, which wears the guise of republicanism, will not succeed in altering this broad consensus which the vast majority of Argentine society has rallied behind. Taking advantage of the anxiety generated by the pandemic and the economic effects of war, extremist and violent discourse gained ground and found fertile ground on which to sow anti-politic sentiment in our societies. Remaining silent before such evidence might lead us to plunge the rule of law itself into crisis. Those who seek to weaken and erode democracies have specific interests which prompt them to promote extreme polarization. Let us not resign ourselves to this state of affairs. Let us unequivocally condemn at a global level those who sow division in our communities. This General Assembly is the body which must note in time the warning signs that resound throughout the globe. As the survivors of a pandemic which lashed humanity, we now face a dilemma. Either we learn the lessons of this tragic experience, or the world will find itself faced with situations whereby increasingly serious clashes occur. The pandemic laid bare the acute inequalities which plague the global population. Is it right that the fortune of only 10 men is greater than the income of 40% of the global population? Is it ethical that the pandemic claimed 4 times more lives in the poorest nations than in the rich ones? Not speaking out against this model of accumulation which places income in the hands of a few while millions remain plunged in poverty may make us complicit in simply strengthening this inequality. We have the time. We have arrived in time to halt several of the threats facing humankind. The injustices that we're noting will only worsen if extreme positions are allowed to take root, if wars continue over time, allowing hunger to take root, and if persistent inflation ultimately corrodes the income of the weakest among us. We must work together, shoulder to shoulder. We must strengthen a cooperation-based multilateralism which ensures that we can strengthen the rule of law. We must work in a way to ensure that non-violence prevails, and we must ensure that greater equity ultimately reduces social divides. To tackle the aforementioned challenges, we must restore peace. We have always preached the peaceful solution of disputes. It is of the utmost importance that all hostilities that are now raging cease. For this reason, we need to work hand in hand to ensure that dialogue prevails and to restore peace in the dispute which was unleashed by the military advance of the Russian Federation on Ukrainian territory. As we seek to reach the horizon of global peace, we must abandon economic and financial practices which the developed world forces the developing world to comply with. Allowing this status quo to continue will only increase poverty and marginalization. If we do not change, we will not be able to build fairer and freer societies, societies which are more stable and who are committed to their own institutions. Nations in debt suffered much more acutely the effects of the established system. Argentina is among these nations. Consequently, I wish to thank all states that supported us and that continue to support us in the complex process of renegotiating our external debt. It is a debt which my government did not produce, but which it diligently grapples. Our positions are well known. They are in line with the provisions agreed upon by this General Assembly in Resolution 69/319 of 2015. This resolution stated that the restructuring of sovereign debt must occur in such a way as to promote sustained and inclusive growth, minimizing economic and social costs, guaranteeing the stability of the international financial system, and respecting human rights. We are calling for a paradigm shift, a shift in the paradigms which underpin the international financial system. At the same time, we support the goals which underpin the Sustainable Development Agenda 2030 of the United Nations. The food security is something which must be guaranteed for all inhabitants of the planet. We cannot allow time to pass and famine to reign. The recent reports of the FAO raise the alarm regarding the impact of excessive volatility of prices of some commodities, and they sound the alarm regarding the disruption of input markets, the markets of inputs which affect the production in agriculture. All of this had and has an important impact on global inflation, and all of the above is to the detriment of those left furthest behind. Argentina will continue to play its role as a reliable producer and exporter of nutritious and quality food. We'll also continue to act as a provider of applied technologies which can be applied to food production to improve yields. We must guarantee a fairer international trade system for agricultural produce. This system must be more transparent, more equitable, and more predictable. If we strengthen this system, food-producing nations will be able to make the necessary investments to increase production and ultimately mitigate global hunger. We must guarantee food security. In the same way, we must ensure that we can predictably and safely access energy. Argentina will continue to play an active role in contributing to tackling this major challenge. We are increasing production to provide the world with clean energy, and with those forms of energy such as natural gas make it possible to reduce carbon emissions during the energy transition. We have the second largest global reserve of unconventional gas and the fourth largest global reserve of non-conventional oil. We have a major reserve of lithium, and we have the potential to develop solar and wind energy, just as we do low and zero emission hydrogen. We're working to guarantee that this path towards environmental sustainability, food security, and energy security is possible. However, all efforts will be in vain if we do not walk this path in a broader context of more equitable economic and social development. Bolstered by this very conviction, we are deploying our industrial capacities and we are creating added value across the production chain. We must ensure that at every stage of this production chain, our industrial providers, scientists, and technological specialists are involved. Production called for by decent work is the path that we have chosen to ensure development. We are obliged to seek a form of development which benefits all. In the same way, the environmental situation facing our globe means that we must urgently take resolute and decisive action for the benefit of future generations. Environmental problems require everyone's involvement. These problems require constructive relationships between states and societies. This is a vital partnership without which sustainable development will be no more than a pipe dream. Questions that must be dealt with without delay, such as climate change, biodiversity, and plastic pollution, mean that we must work together and rally with the hope that we will be able to build broad consensus to guarantee the preservation of the planet and humankind. We're not all equally responsible for the climate crisis. Neither Latin America, nor the Caribbean, nor Africa are those primarily responsible for carbon emissions. Of course, responsibilities for tackling climate change must be differentiated, and that means we need to lighten the burden of climate change visited upon those that weren't responsible for it. Mr. President, we wish to continue strengthening Argentina's tradition of being grounded in the principles of international humanitarian law. We must ensure the unfettered respect of the sovereignty of states, the self-determination of peoples, and the gender perspective and cooperation. This is a tradition we wish to build on. Within CELAC, we have the pro-tempore presidency, and in that role, we are strengthening the principles of cooperation. We are promoting democratic pluralism and fostering South-South and triangular cooperation. Argentina is actively present in peacekeeping operations. These are an essential tool of the United Nations organization. We will continue in this role. I wish to draw attention to the use of unilateral coercive measures. In accordance with the United Nations Charter, the only legitimate sanctions are those imposed by the Security Council in order to enforce decisions taken in the field of the maintenance of peace and security. Pursuant to the above, Argentina wishes to amplify the appeal of the peoples of Cuba and Venezuela for the lifting of the blockades beleaguering these nations. Mr. President, I wish to thank all member states for having placed their trust in Argentina to hold the presidency of the Human Rights Council this year. For us, the defense of human rights forms parts of our identity and indeed of our history. The mothers and grandmothers of the Plaza de Mayo taught us to persist and to fight. These women paved the way so that with political will and a sense of social consensus we were able to undertake a process leading to the eradication of impunity, a process which is one of a kind worldwide, and it is a process based on memory, truth and justice. Driven by this same spirit, our country has broadened citizens' rights. We've created laws and public policies which champion the equality of women and non-binary persons, and we've done so from an intersectional, intercultural and human rights-based approach. Social equality is so extolled, but it means that all of us must be able to access the advantages offered by this era. In the digital era which is ours today, we believe it is a matter of priority to universalize access to ITCs, and we must promote initiatives which reduce the inequalities patently obvious in today's world. The UN organization is the appropriate forum for the international community to find the agreements necessary to guarantee that we can continue to enjoy a free, open, stable, safe, and above all, peaceful cyberspace where anonymity does not sow hatred and violence. Mr. President, Argentina condemns terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. All forms and manifestations of terrorism must be fought against with full respect for international law and the rule of law. We continue to fight against impunity. We are investigating the attacks that we suffered in 1992 against the Israeli embassy and the 1994 attack against the AMIA headquarters. These attacks claimed the lives of 107 people and injured hundreds more. We want to see those responsible for these atrocious attacks identified, tried, and eventually sentenced. Once again, we urge the Islamic Republic of Iran to cooperate with Argentina's judicial authorities to allow progress to be made in the investigation against the AMIA attack. We also urge the international community to support us in our fight by avoiding sheltering or welcoming any of those charged, even if they enjoy diplomatic immunity. We must acknowledge that these people have international arrest warrants that have been taken out against them, as well as being on the Interpol Red Notice list. Latin America and the Caribbean are a region of peace. We work to ensure that this region is fairer and more egalitarian. We know that Mercosur has a formidable comparative advantage in particular, and that Latin America in particular does when it comes to the production of food and the provision of sustainable energy. We have a major opportunity for our development. If we increase the quality of life for our people through the creation of genuine employment, we'll be able to eradicate the pockets of poverty which remain in our societies. Mr. President, I wish to reaffirm the legitimate and imprescriptible rights of sovereignty that the Argentine Republic has over the Malvinas Islands, the South Georgia Islands, and the South Sandwich Islands, as well as the surrounding maritime areas. These are part of the Argentine national territory and have been illegally occupied by the United Kingdom for almost 190 years. The request made through Resolution 2065 of 1965 remains in force and has been made again and again on several occasions. The United Kingdom continues to fail to heed the appeal to resume negotiations regarding the territorial dispute. Worse still, it worsened the dispute through its calls for the illegal exploitation of renewable natural resources and non-renewable natural resources in this area. They also persist with their unjustified and disproportionate military presence on the islands. This act does nothing other than bring tension to a region characterized as a zone of peace and international cooperation. We ask the Secretary General to renew his efforts in fulfilling this mandate, and we call upon the United Kingdom to comply with the international community's appeal and to once again put an end to this anachronistic colonial situation. Against this backdrop, I wish to reiterate that my country stands ready and willing to return to the negotiating table and to seek a solution which will ultimately make it possible to put an end to this protracted sovereignty dispute. Mr. President, we live in a world in which injustices and inequalities are on the rise. At the same time, risks to democracies are growing, peace is being undermined, and uncertainty is gaining ground. We have an ethical duty which cannot be delayed. The time is now. The time is now. We must work on and implement effective global agreements which eradicate hunger, which drastically reduce inequality, which guarantee democratic stability, peace, and peaceful coexistence. Humankind is at risk. Humbly, Argentina extends an appeal to all countries of the world to build a new global paradigm which guarantees prosperity with social justice. Many thanks indeed.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Argentine Republic for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency.